Everyone, and welcome back to the Spark Social Justice online series. We are so happy that you've come to join us again, and we are really overwhelmed by the incredible support we've had on the video so far. So if this is your first video, make sure you go check out the other videos that we've done after this video. Today I am so incredibly delighted to welcome Sister Katrina Alton, who is one of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, who is here to talk about her experiences as a peace activist and remaining resilient while doing so. So welcome, Katrina.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So my first question, and the question that I ask quite a lot of people when they come in on our series, is what was your journey? How did you get to where you are today, and what was your experience in getting there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think for most of us it's never straightforward. Some people are really blessed, and I use that word literally, that from a very young point in their life they know exactly what path God is calling them on, and they have the courage to say yes to that and follow that. I think most of us, God gives us little clues on the way, but it's quite hard to discern exactly where that's leading us. So as she said, I'm a sister of St. Joseph of Peace. I'm a Catholic religious. My order's apostolic, which means we go out to work in the world. And I guess my attraction to that is rooted in my childhood experience of growing up in Northern Ireland. So my family were Christian, but not Catholic. And it was during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So there was lots of bigotry and aggression and violence. As a child, when you grow up in those situations, you think that's normal because you don't know any different. But I think over the years, I realised the trauma of that. And it made me realise that God calls us to be peacemakers, and that's an active thing. So when I came across a congregation for whom this is the heart of who we are, I felt like I'd come home. I'd become a Catholic. And yeah, looking back, I was really blessed that even though I grew up in a completely different culture, so I grew up as a Protestant, there was always people within that community who were showing me another way. So the media propaganda was saying you should hate Catholics, you should have nothing to do with them, they're the other. Like I remember my Sunday school teacher when I was about 7, her constant message to us was, God loves you just as you are, and God loves everyone just as they are. And that sort of gave me the ability to see beyond all this hate that was being preached. And I often think, to this day, in my head, I call her Mrs. Gordon because she was my Sunday school teacher. And Mrs. Gordon really sowed God's love and love for others in my heart. So I just give her credit for playing a huge part on my journey.
Yeah. You kind of already touched on this, but so like growing up and even because like kind of becoming a young adult, like who were role models on your journey, and like were there any experiences that like particularly inspired you to kind of work harder on your journey as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, once you hit teenage years, secondary school, it's very hard to find who you are when you're being pulled in so many different ways. You know, there's academic pressures, family pressures. My faith was always strong. I feel very blessed to have had that gift. But I started to become quite political. But what I was sort of living was this really divided life. So I'd go to church on Sunday with my family, and that was all great. But nobody mentioned anything that was going on in the world. So, you know, the Cold War was happening, the miners' strike was happening. This is the 80s, mid-80s, late 80s. Threat of nuclear war, high unemployment and poverty. So not that different to today. But that was never talked about. So I was like, oh, well, maybe if you're a Christian, you're not supposed to be interested in politics, or if you're political, maybe you can't still be a Christian. And then my school ran a series of talks, and two of the speakers had a huge impact on me. The first was Bruce Kent, who was the chair, I think he was the chair or the vice chair at that point, of CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And he was Monsignor Bruce Kent at that point. So as this Catholic priest, he came and talked about Catholic social teaching. He talked about Jesus' call for us to be people of peace and peacemakers. He talked about the immorality of nuclear warfare. And I went to that talk, I think I was about 16, 17. I went to that talk with my boyfriend, and we had a blazing row on the way home because he was saying, never heard such rubbish in my life, you know, bringing God into politics, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I just had this revelation. I was like, I don't think I can be a Christian and believe in weapons of mass destruction. So that was like a huge revelation. I have to obviously say said boyfriend is now in the past. That's stating the obvious. But he's also now a paid up member of CND. So he had a bit of a conversion experience too. And then the other person that came to speak was Tony Benn, the late great Tony Benn, who firebrand socialist, came to talk about politics, political engagement, relating to your MP, campaigning. And he talked about the impact of his faith and his mum's faith, Christian faith, on his journey. So it was like these people came and just suddenly answered this question. They were like, showed me how to bring these two sides of my life together. And that was it, really. I was an activist.
So again, kind of touching on that, was there a particular moment where you kind of like realized that you wanted to become a sister, or was it kind of like a gradual transition, or was it something that kind of you saw at a young age and then realized that you wanted to do, or was it?
You can see from the look of my face, the answer is no. Obviously not growing up Catholic, no desire to be a nun. Had boyfriends, always thought I'd get married, have children. Didn't think about religious life at all. While I was at university, so I went to do biblical studies at Sheffield Uni, and that was really significant because that helped me take the Bible seriously, but not literally. And that's an important difference, I think. So that really grounded my faith. And during that time, I became an Anglican. I joined the Church of England. I realised I really liked liturgy and the structure of the liturgical year. But because of my background, because of how I'd grown up, the thought of becoming Catholic was just a step too far. But by the time I got to my early 30s, I realised, obviously I wasn't married, and I'd actually lived a lot of my adult life in community, in Christian intentional communities. So after I graduated, I went to a place called the Urban Theology Unit in Sheffield, which does inner city mission. So I lived in a community there, studied some more theology, but lived in this community. I then went to work for L'Arche in London, with the intention of staying a year, and stayed like 4 or 5. So again, Christian, Catholic community, intentional community. So I guess I got to the point of thinking, what gives me life? Because I believe what God calls us to is what makes us our best self. So yeah, there was a bit of me that was like, I want to make money and own a house and do all the things my friends are doing. But when it got down to it seriously, I was like, actually, I've had these boyfriends and I've never got to the point where I felt I could commit, because the priority was always, what is God asking of me? And the two were never compatible. Now, for some people, they obviously are compatible. So I think it was at that point I realized God was calling me to become a Catholic. So I did that in 2001. I entered the Catholic Church. And then the discernment to religious life came a bit later, because you need time as a Catholic to grow into the faith. And when it came, I was like, no, I can't quite see this working, because we all hold these stereotypes of what religious are, it's all very holy and pious, and you must be exceptional. You must be very holy. You must pray 24/7. But I can remember going onto the website when I discovered the Sisters of St. Joseph Peace. That took a long time. But when I discovered us, I went on the website, and you could look at different sisters' stories, So I clicked on one, and it said Sister Miriam, and she was based in Seattle in the US. And it said, Sister Miriam is currently in prison, having crossed the line at the School of the Americas in opposition to the US's involvement in Latin America. Now, I was reading this in a public library, and I started crying. I had tears streaming down my face, because I was like, I've come home. I thought, I'll never fit in a religious law order. I'm an activist. I've risked arrest. I've got a criminal record. And then one of my sisters was already in prison, serving time, just as St. Peter had, just as St. Paul had, just as lots of saints and activists through the years have, for their faith, to defend the poorest and the weakest in our world, who be crucified by the arms trade, by power, by governments. I was like, okay, I think I will fit with these sisters. So yeah, it took a long time, Tom, but yeah, I got there in the end.
Yeah. So that actually really nicely leads on to the next question, which is, so obviously from being a sister, you've done quite a lot of campaigning and being obviously as an activist. What have been some like highlights from campaigning for different things? What have been some like really high moments that have happened during those?
That's a really interesting question. Obviously, we put our energy, everybody puts their energy into trying to bring change. That's why we join campaigns, whether that's signing a petition online, going on a vigil or a demonstration, organising meetings to inform people. Those things are really important. But I think as Christians, we have to take a step back, because I think Jesus asks one thing of us. He asks us to be faithful. Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus ever say, you have to be successful. You just have to be faithful. And I think some of the best examples of Christians risking so much to bring about really significant change. In their lifetime, nothing really changed, or very little changed. But they had sown the seeds for us. You know, the fact that we have free education in this country, a national health service, women have the right to vote, we all have the right to vote. We've got a long way to go, but those seeds were sown. So I think it's important not to get stuck on success, otherwise you're going to be really disappointed really quickly. But in terms of seeing things grow and change, I've been involved with something called Campaign Against the Arms Trade for about 12, 13 years. And when I first got involved, I was living in London because, well, I already knew about the impact of the global arms trade, which Britain is one of the top buyers and sellers of arms that are used by dictators to suppress their own people, but also to perpetuate war. And my thinking was always, having grown up in Northern Ireland, imagine we used all these resources for peace building, for reconciliation, for health, for education, you know. Imagine somebody gave £1 trillion to the people of Yemen to sort out the mess there, rather than bombing them. But there wasn't any formal Christian involvement really in Campaign Against the Arms Trade at that point. So myself and a friend, another Christian friend, we decided we would go and do an action when the arms dealers came to London to this big international arms fair called Dicing, which is held at the Excel Centre, which is where the government at the moment created the Nightingale Hospital. You know, on the telly you saw that massive exhibition, Excel exhibition centre. Now that's usually full of arms dealers every 2 years. And Amnesty aren't allowed in to monitor what's going on, which always makes me very suspicious. If Amnesty International are excluded, something is probably going on. So just because something's legal, so it's illegal, you know, it's a government-sponsored legal event, but just because something's legal doesn't make it moral. Okay, it's always good to remember. People say, oh, well, they're not breaking the law. Well, no, they're not breaking the law of the land, but what they're doing is bringing about suffering to huge parts of the globe and bringing huge amount of profit to shareholders in these companies. And Pope Francis has said this money is dripping with blood. Now, when I first did an action, we didn't have Pope Francis. So there was 2 of us went and did an action at the arms fair. We had red paint to symbolise the blood of the innocent, and we poured it on one of the signs for the arms fair, and we knelt and prayed. And we prayed for 45 minutes before the police came. And the arms dealers were just walking past us, and not one of them said anything. They wouldn't even look at us. When the police came, the police asked me my name, and I told them my name, and they asked what I was doing, and I said, I'm praying. And he said, well, we'll let you finish your prayers before we arrest you. He didn't realise we were saying a litany, so we just kept repeating it, and he got a bit fed up after a while, and he said, actually, I think you're going to have to stop. So there was the 2 of us were arrested for that action. Fast forward to last year, so that was 2009. Fast forward to 2019. By then we had something called No Faith in War, which was a collaboration of faith groups. And that day, blocking the arms fair, there was over 300 people, all people of faith. Mostly Christian, but people of other faiths. An Anglican bishop came, the leader of the Quakers came, Pax Christi were there with the big Catholic group, the Columbans were there, I was there. And that day over 100 people were arrested, blocking the road. Now, we haven't stopped the arms fair, Technically, it will go ahead next year again. But we're growing the movement. We're raising the profile. Is it a success? How do you measure success? Have we faithfully every year been there? Yeah, we have. And the number of people of faith are there and growing. And on other days, other groups come. So there's groups to say refugees welcome instead of arms dealers. There's an environmental group comes. All different people each day, Palestine solidarity groups. And I think that's the other important thing, that as Christians, we immerse ourselves alongside people who are in solidarity with these gospel values, that we're not better or cleverer, or, you know, we don't have the answers. We have something special to offer. We have a spirituality that underpins this and strengthens us in this. But I think there's something very important about seeing it as a journey, and it isn't always straightforward, and it's for the long haul.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the things that I've always seen when I've done campaigns or anything in the past is that everyone in it is there's like quite a good camaraderie there, you know, like everyone's there for each other, everyone's kind of helps each other out, especially things like this. So it's such a welcoming environment, even though it's something so, you know, it's something so different. It's so interesting. I always find that though, that the people that are there are always so like welcome, and you know what I mean. It's very very quick to get involved. And I think so, and that kind of leads me on to my next question, which is, you know, campaigning is so important, but why do you think, like, young people, why do you think young people should get involved? And do you have any tips for young people who kind of want to get involved with campaigning? Because, like, as you know, especially with social media and things, young people are becoming more like, are getting more involved in campaigning, even if it's just over social media. So do you have any kind of tips for how to get involved, but also how, yeah, I guess kind of how to get involved and what to do when you're involved?
I think it's that thing of think locally, act globally. Especially now with lockdown. You know, I'm based in Nottingham. Wherever you are, there will be groups that you can become part of. But before you do that, just take a step back and say, what am I passionate about? Because there's so much injustice, but find the thing that really touches your heart, because that's where God is. You know, the thing when you think about it just breaks your heart. That's where God is, and that's where God is inviting you to be. So it might be something around the environment and the climate emergency. It might be about food poverty, mental health, the arms trade, Black Lives Matters, all sorts of really important things. When I came to Nottingham, again, as a peace activist, wanted to do something around the arms trade. There wasn't anything, or nothing I could find that was of a Christian base. And I thought, well, maybe then I have to look for something different. But what I discovered was there is a gun factory in Nottingham. So I was like, okay, so there's a need here. So I'd met another Christian, a Methodist, who's based in Nottingham. So her and I just started this vigil on a Friday, once a month, outside this arms factory, because the local tram goes past. So we had our placards that everyone on the tram could see. We started giving out leaflets. We'd done it a couple of times and people started saying, have you got a petition? I want to sign something. I want to complain to the council. We haven't thought of a petition. Let's have a petition. So from that little seed of two of us who felt a bit intimidated, it was a bit scary, just standing there, the two of us on a Friday afternoon. But we were like, okay, we just need to say, this is here on your doorstep, because people didn't know. Arms companies don't have big signs saying, we're making guns and submachine guns here. So my suggestion would be, what's local? If you can't find it, create it. Because social media gives you the tool to just put it out there and find people who will come in solidarity with you. And just all the tools for your toolkit. Think about petitions, think about vigiling, think about organising meetings to raise public awareness. Obviously, in lockdown, that all have to be done via Zoom or whatever. But just think of all the different ways you can do it. It's not about jumping to the big protest, risk arrest. That's like last resort. You might be able to persuade your council to have better mental health services for vulnerable adults just by having meetings, getting a petition going, talking to your local councillors. That might bring about change quite quickly. Bigger global stuff, obviously you're linking into bigger networks, but start with what touches your heart. Otherwise you're going to get so fed up and so disappointed so quickly.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. My final question is about the Gospels. Obviously, they inspire so many people, but what I've discovered through doing interviews, but also through school, is that lots of young people struggle to find inspiration in the Gospels. Do you have any kind of advice for young people on how to become inspired by them? And do you have any kind of, and this is going to sound a bit weird, but do you have any recommendations of where to start?
That's not weird at all, because we all have to start somewhere. I think we come with so much baggage about the Bible, because let's be honest, not every homily we've ever heard will set the world on fire. Not every RE lesson we've sat in would, make you want to get up and change the world. And I include myself in this. I've done youth work and all sorts of things, and I'm sure I've not been inspiring every time. So I'm not blaming anyone, but we get saturated. We think, oh, I know that story. So my advice would be, pick up your Bible, start with the Gospels, start with Jesus, and read it just to find out about Jesus, and try and read it with fresh eyes, not with what you've heard or what you think you've heard. And really read what the text says, not what you think it says, what it actually says. Like this Sunday's Gospel is the feeding of the 5,000. Now, very familiar story, we've all heard that in children's liturgy, in school assemblies, all sorts of things. But imagine putting yourself in that crowd, 5,000 people that come to hear Jesus. Think how noisy it can be in a parish mass when children start crying. I used to imagine that scene, they're all sitting on this beautiful hillside, listening to Jesus' words of wisdom. You probably couldn't hear yourself think. Also remember, there was no portaloos. The smell of the Gospels brings us down to our humanity. Jesus came to be amongst us in the mess, the noise, the confusion. And these stories aren't about history. They're about what we're being called to today. So the disciples say, oh, come on, it's getting late. There's all this big crowd. Imagine 5,000 people. You better send them away because they're not going to have anything to eat. And Jesus turns to the disciples and says, you feed them. And Jesus is turning to us every day and saying to us, the crowds are out there, they're hungry spiritually, they're facing food poverty, they're facing racism, they're facing violence. You feed them. You share yourself. And that's the essence of the gospel. Jesus just inviting us to share ourselves. And in that story, this kid comes forward with his bread and his fish, and everyone's fed, and there's more. And when we step forward, sometimes we feel, well, I've got nothing to give. But that act of stepping forward, I really believe God honours that. And God says, okay, you're giving me yourself, I'll do the rest. You just take that risk, because it can be really frightening to step out the crowd, to step forward and say, I'm going to try and share something of who I am. What if people don't like me? What if people laugh at me? What if I get it wrong? And Jesus just says, there is no wrong. There is no wrong. There's just you. And the way you do it, no one else can do that. And I think that's how the Gospels, these stories are so simple. Let's not make it complicated. They're simple. They're just asking us, this is the God who gave him his very self in a really simple way to ordinary people who were as confused and frightened and fed up and angry and grieving and happy and joyous and excited, just like you and me. But Jesus never does things alone. It's always together. And so the gospel are just inviting us 2,000 years later to join that mission, to join that journey of bringing the kingdom of God here and now, so that God's reign can break through and turn this world upside down, where the first are last. And we're seeing other movements outside the church show us how to do some of this too. So Black Lives Matters, the climate action organisations, peace movements, all sorts of people are showing us already. They're bringing the gospel. They might not use that language, but they're doing it. So wherever you find that energy, whether it's in your church or outside your church, have the courage to say, okay, Jesus, I'm stepping forward. I know you're with me, and let's continue this journey.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Sister Katrina, for joining us this week. That was a great conclusion to a very powerful episode. I'm so thankful you came to join us and tell us about yourself, but also the work that you've done. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. That was a pleasure. Thank
you so much. So to everyone watching, if you could, please like the video and subscribe to our channel, because it really helps us out. And if you'd like to see more content like this as well, you can turn on the post notifications so you're all notified whenever we upload, and you'll never miss an episode like this. You can also visit our channel to catch up on previous episodes. I mentioned that at the start. So if this is your first episode or your second, you can go and catch up on the other interviews we've done. We also have a Twitter and a Facebook page with regular updates, not only about the YouTube channel, but about great work that's going on all over the place. Thank you again for joining us, Sister Katrina, and thank you everyone watching for joining us this week. And we'll see you another time for another video, I guess. Thank you.